or something like that, once I get the video back, and it'll be available for all the folks who couldn't make it today. Thank y'all for coming out and around. Charlotte?
First off, I want to introduce Reverend Darrell Brown. Darrell is the youth minister at the First Church here in Richmond, and I've asked him to open us up with a prayer. Darrell does an amazing job with our youth, I tell you. He's speaking on the gospel of Jesus Christ, and they are understanding.
Thank you, sir. Let's pray. Father, we just come to you today, just humble and grateful to be able to gather together as a group of believers, Father. And I just pray that you will bless our time today, Father. As we listen, I pray that we will listen with sensitive and open hearts, Father. We pray that you will make things clear to us. And Father, we just help us to remember and understand what our goal and what our purpose is here on this earth. And that is to spread the good news and to love others. But Father, most of all, to seek after you and to seek your will and your calling in our lives, Father. And Father, my heartfelt prayer for everyone here in this room today, Father, and the life of our church and everyone around us, that we'll close out worldly culture and what things around us are telling us what you should look like. And I told our students this Wednesday night that the Israelites are really good at putting you in a box. And we're really good about putting you in a box today and making you fit what we want you to do and how we want you to look to make our lives easier. So, Father, I pray that we take you out of that box, Father, and that we will go to Scripture and that we will seek you and look for answers and know what you have to say through Scripture. And that you will continue to teach us, and it will be sensitive to how you lead us and how you guide us. And that we will follow you. We'll follow you and not what the world says you should look like. So be with us now. Be with Pastor Kevin as he leads us in this presentation, Father. And like I said, we just have open hearts and open minds to you and be sensitive to what you are telling us. And I pray that you just speak to us today. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Well, we're glad to have Kevin Lobello here with us today. Well, I think most of you know Kevin. Some of you might not know Kevin, but Kevin is a retired clergy of the First United of the United Methodist Church. He retired this past year. Before retiring, he served many churches in North Georgia, and we were fortunate enough to have him at our church here in Griffin for several years. And while Kevin was here, he and his wife Peggy were very involved not only in the church but in the community. And they did a lot of things in the community. When I invited Kevin, William and I decided we would get this place, the community place, a good place to have him come speak, because that way we figured anybody in the community would feel welcome to come and be in on this. And there are a lot of people that I don't know here, so I guess we've got some people from all over the community. Kevin's last church in Carterville last year disaffiliated from the United Methodist Church. And Kevin is now retired, as I said, from the United Methodist Church. And Kevin holds the title now as Global Methodist Church Organizer for North Georgia. Is that right? Right. So Kevin's going to make a presentation. From what I understand, he's going to talk about disaffiliation and then answer questions that anybody might have. and then he's going to do a presentation on the Global Methodist Church and answer questions on that. So with that, here's Kevin.
It is so good to be here. I'm so excited to be back with all my friends and everything. As Charlie said, I retired after 36 years as an elder in the United Methodist Church and pastored several churches and held kind of positions in the church. And I won't tell you the whole story, but we had some Korean ladies, some missionaries in Cartersville when I was getting ready to go to an annual conference. And they wanted to pray over me. They were here praying over pastors in the community. They were praying over the fact that they were celebrating that Billy Graham had been to Seoul, Korea 50 years prior, and 100,000 people or something got saved, and it said to change the culture of South Korea. So they were here saying thank you and praying for us. They said we needed to come pray for the American church now, the USA church, because they've kind of lost their way, you know. And so they prayed over our churches. They're all over the country. And so they were praying for me. They said, what can we pray for you? I said, well, I'm on my way to annual conference. And I said, I'm going to retire, but God's not finished with me yet. I know I'm supposed to retire, but I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to do. And so they prayed over me, and they didn't speak English. They prayed Korean. Listen, they prayed long and loud. And I had no idea what they were saying. No idea at all. And after a while, they got finished praying in about 20 minutes. They finished praying, they talked to their interpreter, and their interpreter said, they told me to tell you that God's going to answer your prayer immediately. And I said, well, that's a weird thing to say. So when the annual conference, I went on stage, I got retired, I got off the stage, I sat in my seat, and Carolyn Moore, who's pastor in Augusta, who was at that time was chairman of the Global Methodist Church Council, she looked at me, she said, Kevin, she said, we're looking for somebody to be the Global Methodist Church organizer in North Georgia. Would you know somebody? Would you be interested? I went, Lord, it doesn't work that way. I mean, normally, it doesn't work that way. But I said, well, let me pray about it, would you? She said, oh yeah, pray about it. And so that evening, 4 or 5 people came up to me and said, I understand you're the new Global Methodist Church. and let me just say that Lisa and some of the rest of you who know me well know that the term organizer and Kevin Lobello don't go together. At all. So at the best, it's a misnomer. But I'm doing my best. So what I'm doing is twofold. One, I'm doing this. I'm going all over the north half of Georgia and just sharing the story of how the Global Methodist Church came to be and what it is, because there's so much misinformation, rumors, and all about what it's about, and also talking about disaffiliation. Why so many people feel strongly about disaffiliating and the process of disaffiliation, and as well. The other thing I'm doing is helping to put the structure together for the North Georgia Conference of the Global Methodist Church. That is really outside my area of expertise. But I've got lots and lots of help and people, lay people and pastors all over who we're forming together boards, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the second half. And we're popping up new churches pretty regularly right now in North Georgia. So things are exciting to say the least. So what about it? So, a couple of things I want to talk about. First of all, I want you to know this is not a new problem that the United Methodist Church is having at all. This is something that's been going on for a really, really long time. Since 1968, we really know nothing but decline in the United Methodist Church. And we're not alone. I'm going to show you a graphic in a minute. Pretty much all the mainline churches have known nothing but decline. And there's lots of reasons for that. The Big Tent philosophy that was approved in 1968. By the way, the United Methodist Church was born in 1968. I'm a Methodist. I will always be a Methodist. I love the Methodists. I'm going to die, Lord willing, I'm going to die a Methodist. But I kind of, not personally, in my heart, a lot of what I'm going to tell you is my testimony. In my heart, the United Methodist Church has kind of left me in my theology and my ethos. So 1968, the United Methodist Church was born. It was born because United Brethren Church joined with us, and we were very excited about that. I was going to Methodist Church at the time. Remember, it was Methodist Episcopal Church South. Some of you are old enough to remember that. And then in 1938 became the Methodist Church. 1968 became the United Methodist Church. But not only did that happen, they also adopted a philosophy called the Big Tent philosophy. And the Big Tent philosophy was that we can be, have a lot of different opinions, and that's okay. And it is okay, but the problem is we kind of disagreed on what's essential. The Big Tent philosophy basically says, as long as we agree on what's essential, then we can disagree on the unessentials, and that's okay. We can live together in love and charity, and it's okay. But lately we feel like we're kind of growing apart on some of the essentials, like who is Christ, and what's necessary for salvation, and what does the Bible mean, and the authority of the Bible, and the authority of the church, and other things we'll talk about in a second. And so we found out that we cannot be missionally aligned if we're not theologically aligned, and that's part of the problem. And I do want to say this right from the beginning. Although human sexuality is not the root of the problem, it's what people talk about, right? It's the presenting issue, and it's a troubling issue. And you need to know, every General Congress that I'm aware of has spent, since 1968, has spent much time debating the issue. And each time, the traditional language, and I know this is going to be repeat for a lot of you, but in our book of discipline, there's some what I call traditional language about human sexuality. And this is what it says right now in our book of discipline. It says that all people are of sacred worth, and that we need to love all people, that all people, we need to treat them equally in terms of employment and justice and all that thing. But our discipline, which is the book that we go by, it states what United Methodists believe. But we think that the practice, and that's important, that the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. And because of that, then we don't marry same-sex couples in any United Methodist church. It's against our rules. We're not allowed to do that, nor do we ordain someone who's a self-avowed practicing homosexual. We don't do either of those things. That's against our rules in order to do those things. So every General Conference tried to change that, They said, well, that's archaic, We've got people, my son's gay, or my daughter's gay, or my granddaughter's gay, and I love them. Well, of course you love them. I hope you love them. You need to love them. You need to honor them and love them with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. You need to. But that doesn't necessarily mean that who you love should determine what's right and wrong. You see what I'm saying? I have a cousin who I love to death, and he's a drug addict. He's a drug addict. I love him. I do. But he's wrong. What he's doing is wrong. It doesn't determine what's right or wrong. But every General Conference spent time debating it, trying to change the rules, and every time it's been defeated, and the traditional language has held out. So I want you to know that as we go forward, I don't like to use the word sides, and I don't like all these stereotypes like progressive and liberal and traditionalist and conservative. I don't like those, but I do talk about perspectives. So those who have a more conservative or traditional perspective don't have a problem with what's written in the book of discipline. But we do have a problem with what's being done. What's being done and what's being ignored and purposely violated. That's the issue. And not only that, but what the promise is that it's going to be changed. The promise is by the bishops and the hierarchy and the people in authority, that this church have said, it's going to be changed. No doubt. That's what they're saying. So many different places. So what's going on? Well, for a while it was just kind of a national issue. This is Bishop Karen Lobello. She was elected bishop out west, okay? And she's married to another lady, which makes herself a vowed practicing homosexual. She never should have been ordained a pastor, but she was. She was. And not only that, she was made a bishop. She was elected a bishop. Okay, that's fine. That's wrong, but more so, when she was elected a bishop, people went and they put her up on charges, and they said, this is not right. And it went to what's called the Judicial Council. The Judicial Council of the United Methodist Church is the Supreme Court of United Methodism. When we have conflicts, when we have debates, it goes, and we can't solve it in our conferences, it goes to the Supreme Court, the Judicial Council, for a ruling. And they're smart people and judges and lawyers and all kinds of people that are on it. Hillary Clinton was on it for a while. A lot of different type of people are on the Judicial Council. The judicial council looked at it all, and they said, absolutely right. She should never have been ordained a preacher. She should never have been elected a bishop. And so they sent her back to her conference, and her conference says, we don't care. We don't care what you say. We're going to keep her. She's a bishop today. She remains a bishop today. So those things were happening. By the way, the jurisdictional conference just selected a gentleman this time who's married to a man. Again, self-avowed practicing, and they elected him bishop as well. Again, seemingly they don't care what the judicial council says, what the book of discipline says. And that was fine till, and we were saying, well, at least it's not here in North Georgia. We maintain what's going on in North Georgia. We keep to the discipline. Everything's fine. So I just want to let you know, there's a same-sex couple, 2 boys, are getting married. They're getting married at Glen Memorial United Methodist Church on the Emory campus. Marrying them is husband and wife clergy team that are ordained North Georgia Conference clergy. An interesting thing happening, and this I get more upset about this than the other. So when that happened, their district committee on ministry said, one of those 2 boys that was getting married was a candidate for ministry. He was in process to become a minister, right? And so when they got married, they came, I guess you say, out of the closet, whatever. That was an admission that they're self-avowed practicing homosexual. So their district committee on ministry said to this young man, says, you're not allowed to be a pastor, and took him out of the stream, and said, we're going to pull away your license and not allow you to go forward in the candidacy program. And our bishop, and this is from their Facebook page, and you can see what he wrote, the young man wrote. He said, I'm recertified the Central District Committee on Ordained Ministry, and further discernment with Bishop Sue Howard Johnson and the Conference Center for Clergy Excellence reinstated my certification. They really have no right to do that, but they did it anyways. Again, I was looking for, just another example, I was looking for a friend of mine at an annual conference in June, and I said, has anybody seen this gentleman? And a friend of mine said, well, you probably passed her, but you probably didn't recognize, I think he used the term they, because he now showed up as a woman in his pulpit one Sunday, and now that's the way they, I guess is the proper term, presents himself. There's another same-sex wedding, again, that's a North Georgia Conference pastor who's performing the wedding. And here's the problem. This is the Bishop of Florida, right? And you probably can't read that, but this is what that is quoted to say. And while I believe in our traditional Orthodox faith that's rooted in the Scriptures, I also have always believed that we have to adapt our doctrine and our Scriptures to changing life circumstances that people have. Bishop Ken Carter, Florida bishop at the time. We don't adopt our Scripture. Our Scripture, I've always said this, that when we read something in Scripture that we don't agree with, the assumption isn't that Scripture's wrong. The assumption is we need to pray about that and see where we're wrong with that, okay? Or to try to understand the Scripture better, perhaps. So, and that's the issue. By the way, this was in the Atlantic Gay Pride Parade. The United Methodists of North Georgia had a float in the Atlantic Gay Pride Parade, and that's our bishop carrying a sign that says "Bishop Hugs" as she marches in the Atlantic Gay Pride Parade. So, because of all that happening, a lot of folks have felt that it's really time to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. And so, in 2016, at the General Conference is the conference that meets every 4 years. It's the worldwide conference. It comes together and it writes the book of discipline. It tries to hash out the issues and problems. And in 2016, they got together and it was just mass chaos. Again, there was a lot of talk about human sexuality. There was a lot of talk about the structure of the church. There was a lot of talk about a lot of things. And as it went on, it seemed like the church was going to tear itself asunder. And so near the end of the conference, some folks came and said to the bishops, you're tasked with ordering the church. You're tasked with leading the church. You need to do something, because there's not anything you can do. So the bishops put together a committee, and again, excuse me if you've heard this before, but something called the Way Forward Committee. And they said, when the Way Forward Committee got together, they said, you try to find a way that we can deal with this, that we can stay together as a denomination, that we can learn to live and love and go forward in ministry together. And when you figure it out, let us know. We'll have a special call general conference, and we'll vote on it once and for all, and that'll be the end of it. Okay? So they finished out 2016, but they didn't come up with anything. 2017, they didn't come up with anything. 2018, they didn't come up with anything. 2019, they said, well, now we've come up with something. And so what they came up with this, they said there are 4 ways that we can go forward with this. Well, I'll be honest with you, I was so disappointed when I heard that, because we all knew that there were 4 ways that we could go forward with this, right? I don't know what they honestly did for 3.5 years. But one of the ways they said was that we can become, it's a plan that most people endorsed, the bishops endorsed, the hierarchy endorsed. It was called the One Church Plan. And in the One Church Plan, basically what it said was the churches could kind of set a lot of their own rules about who would be married in their church, and they could set a lot of their own procedures and precedent. And the conference could do the same thing. We'd still be one church, one big church, but the conferences could have different rules, the churches could have different rules, and we could go forward with that. And that seemed to be the way it would work, go forward. So they got together and they proposed that. Some people in this room, I think, were probably there when this happened. Well, lo and behold, that plan got voted down. It got voted down. And what happened in all the other previous general conferences, a more traditional plan, one of the plans that they didn't expect to be voted on, but one of the plans, they said, one of the 4 ways they said we could go was a traditional plan. And the traditional plan said, well, we're going to keep the language as it is in the Book of Discipline. We'll keep that traditional language that's in there, but we'll add teeth to it. And we'll find a way to hold people accountable to adhere to that book until we change it. And then if we change it, and we go on. But until we change it, we'll adhere to what's written in the Book of Discipline. And that's the plan that passed. Well, when that plan passed, it was chaos. Many of the conferences, some people say most, I don't know if that's true, many of the conferences just came right out and said, we're not going to abide by it. We're just not going to abide by the decision of the General Conference. Will Wilmot, who up to that point I had great respect for, he was the Dean of Chapel at Duke University, and he was the bishop at that time. He went on, they took it down pretty quick, but I did a video, YouTube thing, and he said, we came together in 2019, we prayed, we fasted, we asked for God's will to be done, and God didn't do it. What he said was, God didn't do what I wanted. That's what he meant. God didn't do what I wanted. That broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart when I heard him say that. Well, at that point now, it was just obvious that we really couldn't stay together. And at that point, and all the chaos that ensued after that, they said, we just can't stay together as a denomination. So people who held all perspectives, people who held a liberal perspective, so a group called Reconciling Congregation, which held very liberal, progressive perspective on things, kind of what we call centrist, the hierarchy of the church, the bishops and all that. And those who have a more conservative, traditional perspective all said, yeah, we need to separate. So they formed another committee, and they wrote together what was called the Protocol for Gracious Separation. And the Protocol for Gracious Separation basically says we're going to divide it to at least 3 different churches. A very kind of progressive church, a kind of left of center church basically, and a church to the right that's very kind of traditional, conservative. And they all agreed, that they would support that. The Reconciling Congregation said they would support it. The Council of Bishops said they would support it. The traditionalists, the people, they said they would support it. And so they said, we're going to vote on that in General Conference of 2020, which would be the next General Conference. Well, you know what happened, right? 2020 came, and we had a worldwide epidemic, you know. So they canceled General Conference. Okay. And so we'll do it in 2021. 2021 came, and they said, we really don't feel comfortable bringing everybody together. They tried to do a virtual General Conference, and it's just really difficult to do that when you do it with people all over the world. So we're going to postpone it to 2022. When this year came along, however, they said, we still don't feel like we can do that. Well, friends, there were international meetings going on all over the world, everywhere. People were meeting internationally at that time. Some with stringent protocols, others without stringent protocol. Football games had come, everything had come back. And they said, we're not going to do it. In fact, we're not going to do it in 2023. We still feel like we can't do it. We're going to wait to 2024 to do that. So when they did that, lots of us thought, we're not real sure how genuine this is, you know, where we're going with all of this. So certain things happen. I'll talk about in just a minute. But the other thing that happened is the reconciling congregations and the Council of Bishops came out a few months after that and said, and by the way, we're pulling our support of the protocol for gracious separation. We're not going to support that any longer. And so, we're in a mess. We're in a mess. One of the things that happened in 2019 at the General Conference in 2019 was an addition of a paragraph to our book of discipline, paragraph 2553. Paragraph 2553 said, really unprecedented. It said, you know, we're going to provide a way for churches to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. And here's basically what it said. It said, if you don't agree with the church's language on human sexuality, or if you feel like the conference has acted inappropriately or has not acted as it should act, you'd be allowed to disaffiliate. And you'll be allowed to disaffiliate if you do certain things. And here are the things you need to do to disaffiliate. And it has some things there. You have to pay some unfunded pension liability. You have to pay, but that's to cover the pastors that have already retired. A lot of the pastors that already retired have what's called a defined benefits plan. In other words, for every year of service, they get so much money per month. And so that needs to be funded, you know. So they want to get a porpoise amount to fund that. So you have to pay for that. You have to pay, you know, an extra year's apportionments so the conference will have time to plan for your departure as a church. And you know, basically, and you have to vote. You have to vote by a 2/3 majority to vote to disaffiliate. And so that's what you have. And so that's the process that the churches have been in. They've adhered to those things. There's 70 churches last year in North Georgia that did that. There'll be more this year. Yesterday, what, 200, 300? About a third of the churches in Alabama left, disaffiliated. Up to this point, there's right about 2,000 churches have disaffiliated from the United Methodist Church. And so churches all over the country, all over the world, are having these conversations to decide whether or not disaffiliation is a good option for them. Okay. I'm going to stop now, okay? And forgive me for talking so fast, but there's a lot I want to cover, and I don't want to be here all night. So, any questions about that so far? Surely you have some questions. Yes, Bruce?
Kevin, why wasn't action taken with the other conferences when they failed to adhere to the discipline? What are the consequences of disagreeing with the rules?
Well, and that's
Will you repeat the question so the camera will hear it, so we can have it on the recording?
Here's saying one of the consequences when you disagree, when you violate the discipline and you violate the ruling of the judicial council. What are the consequences? You know, well, that's part of the problem. Is that most of the consequences have to take place. The significant consequences have to take place within a conference, like the North Georgia Conference, South Georgia Conference. Within a conference. So if the entire conference feels a certain way, or the leadership of that conference feels a certain way, they can, that's where the accountability lies. And so if they don't want to hold, like for instance, for a while there was a penalty if a pastor did a same-sex wedding in a certain conference. The response to that, the punishment for that, was 1 day off with pay for the pastor.
So the conferences aren't being disciplined, or
no, so they don't discipline. That's what all that's handled within the conference. Conferences have a lot of. They can be censored. They can, but as far as real consequences, and that's why that traditional plan. When we're trying to put that traditional plan together, we're trying to put meat to that and find ways to hold them accountable. But right now, it's hard to. It's hard to. Yeah, Lisa.
When you were saying the leaders of general conference, the thing that meets there, who are the leaders? Are they all the bishops?
Yeah. So general conference, how that's held is every 4 years, our conference, all the different conferences, elect a certain number of people to be a representative and go to general conference. And so, the number in North Georgia, 11, 12, so it depends on how many members we have. And so they go to general conference, and they're your delegates for that. Okay? And so when we get to the general conference, the person sits in the chair as a bishop, and it rotates. Every session, there's a new bishop that sits in the chair. We don't have, Methodist Church doesn't have a person in charge. It's the executive branch of the Methodist Church, the pastors and the bishops, but there's not a super bishop, or there's not there is a president of the council bishop. They don't really have any additional power.
So no pope is what you're saying?
We don't have a pope. Yeah. Okay.
How many Methodist churches are there? 2,000 have disaffiliated. How many are?
I don't know that number. I know here in North Georgia, a few years ago there was right at 1,000. Right now there's 700 and something in North Georgia. Yes.
What's the timetable where the church would have to take a vote for us to be able to follow this policy?
Good question, thank you. What's the time schedule? So here's the thing. So if you want to go out under 2553, paragraph 2553, so you have to, it expires December 31st of 2023. That's what it expires. But one of the steps that's required to disaffiliate under 2553 is the annual conference has to vote on you. Okay? They have to vote on you. So our annual conference meets the first couple of days of June, the last couple of days of May, perhaps. So you have to have had that vote, in your church, in order to get on the agenda at annual conference, to be voted on at annual conference. So the time schedule in North Georgia is like this. Your leadership of your church, be that an administrative board, administrative council, or something of that nature, they have to say, tell the district superintendent, we'd like to vote. We'd like to vote. And you inform the district superintendent of that in January or February. You inform your district superintendent, we'd like to vote. District superintendent says, okay, we're going to have I'll call it church conference, okay? I'll call it church conference in March or April. I'll call it church conference in March or April. So your whole church comes together and to vote. Well, who can vote? Well, all professing members of your church. If you've been through confirmation, no matter how old you are, if you've been through confirmation, if you're a full member of your church, you get a vote. The other thing is, do you have to be there? Yes, you have to be there. So whoever shows up at that meeting gets to vote if you're a full professing member of that church. So what happens in many cases is the district superintendent or a person appointed by the district superintendent will come to that meeting and will have a roll of your church. And as you come in the door for that meeting, for that church conference, they'll look your name up on that roll. Your name's on that roll, they'll scratch it off, and they'll give you a ballot. Okay? And so when everybody's been given a ballot, they come in and they take the vote. According to 2553, do you want to disaffiliate or not? If 2/3 say we want to disaffiliate, then at that time, the bishop superintendent will produce basically a contract that will have the amounts of money that you have to pay. And also, another thing you have to do is you promise to give up all intellectual property of the United Methodist Church, that basically is the cross and the flame and the logo, all that's the name and some other things. You also have to turn copies of historical records into the archives at Pitt's Theological Library at every university, those types of things. So you have a period of time to do that tells you that, spells that out very plainly in that contract. So then you go to annual conference. Annual conference, they'll vote on all the churches that want to disaffiliate. Okay, and then you'll have on that contract also will be a date of disaffiliation, probably something like July 1st or July 15th. And so you'll have from the time you have annual conference, and everybody votes on you, confirms your disaffiliation to that date, July 1st, July 15th, to fulfill those obligations, to come bring the check to the district superintendent. In exchange for that, the district superintendent, you also bring what's called a quit claim deed. A quit claim deed is, right now the United Methodist Church owns your property. You know, if you're a United Methodist Church, the United Methodist Church, not the local congregation, United Methodist Church owns your property, they own your furnishing, the bank account, they own everything. All right, and you hold it in trust for the United Methodist Church. Okay? So you present also what's called quit claim deed. District superintendent will sign it, and that will basically say that the United Methodist Church quits any claim that it might have on your property. So at that point on, your church buildings, your land, your bank accounts, everything belongs to your local congregation. And there's a few other things, but that's the main thing. So that's your question. Time's up.
Hey, Kevin, will you just elaborate a little bit on that, just to let everybody know why it's different in North Georgia than some other conferences, because we are not having additional annual conferences that are voting on this?
Right. And so when I said those requirements for disaffiliation, that you need to understand, that's the minimum. Okay, that's the minimum of requirements. Other conferences can add other things. And other conferences have added other things. Some conferences have added so much that it's impossible for churches to disaffiliate in those conferences. Our bishop, Bishop Sue, has not added a lot of things. She has been fair about it. The one thing that other conferences are doing that she could have done, that she chose really not to do, and she has a right to do that. Some of the other conferences had extra annual conferences, you know, like normally you have annual conference in the summer. Like I just said, Alabama had an extra annual conference yesterday, so a lot of churches disaffiliated. She's not doing that. So the only annual conference we're going to have in between now and the time 2553 expires is next June. Okay, so is there a chance that in June that she could say, well, I'll have what we heard, our new bishop, Bishop Robin Deese, who's going to be a new bishop in North Georgia. Bishop Deese could say, is there a chance that she could say, well, I'm going to have another annual conference because we didn't get to everybody who wants to disaffiliate in September. She could say that, but she doesn't have to say that. Right now, that's the only annual conference, the one in June. Yes?
We have an incredible music director, Steve Moeller. I mean, our department's never been this good. And I'm just begging you, what's going to happen to our music department? I mean, will the music program vanish with this new church?
Not necessarily. That's up to Steve. You know, if the church decides to disaffiliate, Steve's not an ordained, as far as I know, he's not, is he? Steve's just an employee of First Methodist Griffith. You know, what you do, you get rid of the United, whatever you do, church, whatever you want to. Most people are just saying, you know, First Church Griffith, First Church whatever, or First Methodist Church. You keep Methodist. And the staff, unless the staff, for theological or political reasons, doesn't want to stay, which they obviously have a right to do, but if he'd like to stay, he can. You can employ him. Yeah, absolutely. Nothing has to change. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the 2/3 vote.
Uh-huh.
You said there's a roll when you walk in the door, they give you a ballot.
Uh-huh.
But you're never going to get 100% of your roll at the
Correct.
meeting.
Correct.
So the 2/3 is of the ballots that are cast.
Correct.
They roll.
Correct.
Okay.
It's 2/3 of the people that basically that show up at the meeting. 2/3 of the people that show up at the meeting. If 100 people show up at the meeting, you need 67 affirmative votes to disaffiliate, even if you have 3,000 on roll. Yeah, Bruce?
Sorry, one more question, and this may be more directed at William. What is the dollar amount that will cost us to disaffiliate?
Well, I can start, I can answer that. We don't know. You don't exactly know yet. You don't know what your unfunded pension liability amount. There's a number right now, but you won't know that exactly. You will know that number January 15th. You'll know that number January 15th, but right now you don't know that exact number quite yet. If you want to give them an estimate, or
Estimate is around 250,000. No, that's everything. That's 1 year's apportionments plus the unfunded pension liability.
And then the assets will belong to the church.
the assets will then belong to the church, yes.
What does the conference pay any money back to our church in the way of the ministers?
No.
So, we couldn't hear that. I wanted to know as far as this affiliation.
What's that?
What if the conference, we give them lots of money, do they fund the ministers in any way?
Not really. No. Your budget pays the salary of all the ministers. Comes out of your local church budget. Now, there are a few things, perks and stuff that ministers get that if they're not a United Methodist minister, a few little things like health insurance thing that they'll lose if the minister leaves the United Methodist Church. But as far as the salaries and all that kind of stuff, you pay all that out of your budget. I guess.
Can I get a clarification? While I was reading on the website of the United Methodist Church, the disaffiliation step says you had to pay 2 years long.
Well, the thing is, you have on the day of disaffiliation, you have to have paid up to, you have to be current. That's where that confusion comes in. You have to be current, and then you have to pay an additional year. So if you're not current, you have to pay the previous 12 months, and then the next 12 months. So if you're not paying apportionments, it would be 2 years. But you guys have always, I don't know about all the churches here, but I know Griffin Church has always been current with its apportionment, so they would just pay an additional year. Anything else about that? Well, you can. Well, let's go on to the Glow Methodist. So, what happened? So back into about 8-9 years ago, when we saw that this is, we could see this, the handwriting on the wall. Those who held a more conservative, traditional view said we all need to get together. And there were lots of different organizations. There was Good News, there was Wesleyan Renewal Movement. So we said we all need to kind of come together with a group that would advocate for traditional values within the United Methodist Church. Okay? And so an organization was born, the Wesley Covenant Association. You may have heard that name. So that's an organization that still exists, it's going to exist for a while longer, that's going to continue to advocate for traditional Wesleyan values within the United Methodist Church. Okay? But the other thing that it was going to do was to help birth the new denomination that held more traditional views. So what we were going to do was when the Protocol for Gracious Separation was voted on, they were going to launch this new church, the Global Methodist Church, that they were going to launch. But what happened was, as churches were disaffiliating all over the place and lost confidence that the Protocol for Gracious Separation would ever be passed, they said, well, we can't wait, because this is what was happening. Traditional slanted church members were either leaving or the churches were disaffiliating, and those people were going other places. They were leaving the Methodist movement. They were leaving the Methodist Church. They were going down there to Andy Stanley's church. He don't need no more members, Andy Stanley. He got enough members. He ain't all members down there, okay? So we need to keep them in the Methodist Church, right? So they said, well, we need to
launch now. So in May of 2019, the Global Methodist Church launched. Okay, so so we are brand new. We are brand new, and we are as when I did this program about a month ago. One elderly gentleman raised his hand and said, "Son, you trying to build this plane in the air?" That's a good way of putting it. We really are. We really are. But so I won't have all the answers to your questions, but hopefully we'll have some. So the mission of the Global Methodist Church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ who worship passionately, love extravagantly, and witness boldly. That's our mission statement. Okay, that's what we hope to do as United Methodists. Our vision is to join God in the journey of bringing new life, reconciliation, and the presence of Christ to all people, and helping each person reflect the character of Christ. We are Christ-centric. We are Christ-centric. You know, it's all about Jesus and the Global Methodist Church. That's all I can tell you. You know, I can tell you this story. That Korean group that I was telling you about, after the annual conference was over, the theme of the annual conference was "Come to the table" or something like that, or "There's room at the table." So, and there was a table there, and it was, I mean, it was great. It was about, you know, inclusivity and reconciliation, and it was good. All good things, you know. But still, it was very contentious. So when I got back to Cartersville, the Korean ladies were leaving, and they were having a worship service. So I went to their worship, an outdoor service, there were a few hundred people there, and we were just praising Christ, and we were praising the Lord. As we praised the Lord, I looked around, and there was our state representative, Matthew Gamble, that you might know him, Joe Frank Harris's grandson. And he was there, and he was standing in front of me, and he had his arms, one arm around his wife, and one arm around an African-American homeless person who was there. And they were, you know, rocking down. There were people there, rich people, poor people, black people, Korean people, Hispanic people. We were just all worshiping Jesus, you know. And I go, that's how you get to inclusivity. That's how you get to the table, is having your heart and life changed by the power and presence of Jesus Christ. Christ makes all things new. It doesn't work the other way, you know. It works this way. First, make your first. So we want a church that's all about Jesus, that evangelizes. And you know, I think we have forgotten how to evangelize in our church. We've forgotten how we don't evangelize. Like I said, we just continue to have decreases in attendance, and not just Methodists, but the mainline denominations. And professions of faith are just almost non-existent. If you take the profession of faith in the United Methodist, in North Georgia used to lead the world really in professions of faith in the in the United Methodist movement. And you take away all of our confirmation classes. How many professions of faith do you think are left? Thank you. Not a whole lot. The symbol up there is the symbol of the logo for the Global Methodist Church. It's three circles representing Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But in the center is the cross, you know. It's for Christ. And if you look kind of look at it a little bit long, you can see an ichthus or a fish in the middle there as well. Again, for the presence of Christ at the heart and the center of all we do. That's our vision. That's our vision. So as I said, we began on May 1st, 2022. Right now we're being administered by a Transitional Leadership Council. There's 17 members of that council. They're from all over the world, but they represent thousands and thousands and thousands of people. We have what's called the people. What do you believe? Well, if you really want to know what we believe, go on the website, globalmethodist.org, and you can look. There's a transitional book of doctrine and discipline. And it's a few pages, less than 100 pages. It's searchable. If you want to say, what do they believe about so-and-so, you can put in the search bar. It'll take you to it. So we're working hard and we've got a lot, we've come a long way. I said, we've got a lot of churches already signed up. There are more churches outside, by the way, outside the United States than inside the United States. We're truly a global church. I mean, more churches are joining all the time. So, what are some of our core confessions? Again, the Global Methodist Church professes the Christian faith established on the confession of Jesus as Messiah, the Son of God, and resurrected Lord of heaven and earth. We don't make any bones about it. It's for all God's people. By virtue of its very name, the Global Methodist Church is a diverse church where all God's people are welcome. Every color, culture, ethnicity, nationality are welcome to join with others to make disciples of Jesus Christ, to worship passionately, love extravagantly, and witness boldly. Everybody's welcome in the Global Methodist Church, period. And of course, anytime you say, well, you got a bunch of conservative traditionalists, what about women? You gonna let women be preached? Well, of course. Of course. The Global Methodist Church celebrates and praises God for the gifts that women bring to all levels of the church. There are no barriers to where they can serve. Like I told you, the head of it was a lady from Augusta, Georgia, for a while. Her term's expired. Actually, there's another lady, I can't remember who she is. She's head of it now, of the council now. But we are Methodists. I can't emphasize that enough, I was Methodist born, Methodist bred. When I die, I'll be a Methodist dead, something like that. I don't know how that goes in there. But we are Methodists, and there are well-Methodist churches for all people who wish to join a Methodist church, a methodical, practical, warm-hearted pursuit of loving God and serving others as Jesus' disciples in the world. I want to say that we're kind of a throwback to what Methodist Church used to be. You remember the singing, shouting Methodist, when it was passionate and passionately evangelistic. That's where we want to go back to. Not in all ways, but in heart and spirit. So, some organizational distinctives. We're a connectional church, but we're a connection of the willing, not the constrained. In short, there is no trust clause. There never will be a trust clause, as there are in some other denominations, the United Methodist Church and Free Methodist Church, or other denominations. There's no trust clause. A local church merely holds property and assets in trust for a general church. We've talked about that. Instead, the local Global Methodist congregations own all their own property. They own all their own assets in perpetuity. Okay, so why is that important? Well, people have said, well, I'm not real sure about joining the Global Methodist Church. Suppose we join it and we don't like it. Well, then leave it. There's not this process, that we're having to go through now. If a church joins the Global Methodist Church and then they decide, this is really not what we signed up for. We don't like this. Well, then literally, all you have to do is have a meeting. 50% of your congregation, vote. So we want to write a letter to the Global Methodist Church headquarters and say, we no longer want to be a Global Methodist Church. They'll write you a letter back and say, thank you. For all that you've done, let us know what we can do to help you in the future. Done. So we want it to be a connection of the willing, and that's going. I'll show you a few more other places. That's true. Another one of our organizational distincts. Someone said, "You're not going to have bishops, are you?" Yes, we are. Yes, we are. It's part of the Methodist tradition, but bishops are going to be a lot different. Right now, when you elect a bishop in the United Methodist Church, you elect a bishop for life. Okay, you elect a bishop for life, and there's kind of a problem with that. Y'all who have students of church history know that most of the problems in church history go way back. Start with popes, bishops, cardinals, and so forth. And part of that is because they have all that authority, and their bishops or popes are for as long as they want to be. So the role of bishop, the Global Methodist Church, is going to be a sacred trust held for a defined period of time. It's not a lifelong office. In other words, they're going to say, Daryl, we won't let you be a bishop. You can be a bishop for a while. Well, they'll be elected by the people in that conference. They'll elect their bishop, and their bishop will serve for a few years as bishop, won't be a bishop any longer, and then they cannot be a bishop ever again. Okay, so it's just an office of service. So we said, what about district superintendents? You have district superintendents Not really. We're going to have what's called supervising elders. And that, if you've been a Methodist a long time, you know that term. Supervising elders will be someone who has a church, say the pastor of First Methodist Griffin might be the supervising elder for the Griffin district. That means they'll continue to be the pastor of the Griffin church, but they'll also have about 15 or 20 other churches in a small district that they'll be in relationship with. That the supervising elder will call those pastors, do you need anything? Can I help you in any way? And we'll help. The other thing that people will say, well, what's going to keep the Roman Methodist Church from going the same direction as all the other churches have gone? You know, well, part of it is that we're going back to I think about accountability. Okay, the bishop there's going to be a team of lay people and pastors in that conference which are going to hold the bishops accountable. They're going to meet with the bishops, the bishop at their conference, and they're going to ask that bishop, how is it with your soul? How have you served Christ? How have you failed Christ? If you've ever been on a walk to Emmaus and joined a reunion group, the same sort of setup as that. The supervising elder will have a group. The pastors will have a group. And by the way, churches will too. We're going to take very seriously holding one another accountable to be a faithful disciple of Jesus Christ. And that brings us to joyful discipleship. The Lobello Church believes that people have a deep desire to know the truth and devote themselves to it wholeheartedly. Our church believes Jesus is the truth, and He calls us to be His disciples. And I don't want to take that lightly. To be a disciple of Jesus Christ is a serious thing, and we want to hold one another accountable for that. That's what we talk about, accountable discipleship. From its inception, the Methodist movement embraced the importance and power of small groups. The Lobello Methodist Church is committed to recapturing this method of growing faithful disciples. We're going to very much encourage people to have small accountability groups that you be a part of. Missional priorities for the church. What are our missional priorities? Biblical teaching, number one. We want to be a church where we're biblical teaching. We're sharing all people, the whole counsel of God, grounded in Scripture. So we want to be rooted in God's Word, for sure. We want to talk about being transformational discipleship. We are intentional about making, developing, nurturing, and deploying disciples of Jesus Christ. I mean, some of this is obvious. We want to start new churches. We're making it very easy to start new churches. Okay? And we've seen that already. Since we're kind of waiting for more churches to disaffiliate so they can join the Lobello Methodist Church, we know that there's areas where the largest church in the community has said, we're not going to vote to disaffiliate. We're not going to vote on it. We're not going to vote on it. We're going to stop people, the congregation from voting. And so, well, if you're not going to vote on it, we're not going to be a chance to be a Lobello Methodist Church in that community. We'll put one there. So we have put one in 4 or 5 communities already, and we continue to do that. We just announced one in Gainesville, Georgia. And the pastor there is a fine young man with deep roots in Gainesville, a strong preacher, strong Christian. And he'll have his first service Christmas Eve in that church 2 Sundays ago, 3 Sundays ago. I was in Rome, Georgia, at the first service of the Global Methodist Church in Rome, Georgia. And so we've got several more that are in the planning stages of being developed as we speak. But believe in multiplication. I hate to say this, but if you look at new churches and the United Methodist Church in our conference, just look, you know, they get very excited. They talk about a new church, this new church starting, this new church. But if you look at it, you see more often than not, it's combining 2 or 3 churches that closed. You know, that they put together for a new church start. That's not multiplication, that's subtraction. You know, if you have 3 churches, then you have 1 church. That's not multiplication. You know, we want to do multiplication. We want to grow as we go along. This is the decline of membership I was talking about in the various mainline denominations. You can see it goes from 1990 to 2020. This is pre-pandemic, by the way. This is pre-pandemic. So you can see the American Baptist Church, 23% decrease in membership in those years. The Lutheran Church, ELCA, 41%. The Presbyterians, 58%. Episcopal Church 36%, United Church of Christ 52%, United Methodist Church 31% decrease in church membership over that period of time. That's not a healthy timeline. It's not a healthy timeline. Okay, so a couple of things before I go. Questions that people always ask. People, what about apportionments? You know, that's a Lobello term. Are you going to have apportionments? No, we're not. We're going to have something called connectional giving, which is very different. And let me tell you why. Apportionments, United Methodist Church truly has apportionments. And what do I mean by that? The big church, the giant Methodist church, that says we have a budget. Our budget is whatever, $700 million, I don't know, whatever it is. And so they'll divide that up, they'll apportion that up to the various conferences as each conference has the ability to pay. Then the conference takes that, they add a good bit of their own budget to that, whatever conference ministries are. District adds a little bit more to that, and then that's apportioned to all the churches in that conference according to their ability to pay, according to their budget and so forth. And so your preacher goes to a meeting usually in August, and the district superintendent hands down a piece of paper, and they take that piece of paper and it says, this is your apportionment for the year. And you go and you hand that to your finance person, and they put that in the budget, and that's it. The Global Methodist Church is going to be the opposite. What we're asking for is 1% of your operating budget, and this is a recommendation and a request. 1% of your operating budget to go to the Global Methodist Church, the large church, 1% to go to the annual conference. Now, it can go up from that, but there are caps. It can only go up globally to 1.5%, I think 5% for the annual conference. But for the time being and for a while, it's going to be a 1%. South Georgia theirs at 0% because they got a gift of money and they're able to operate it. But for now, it'll be 1%. Well, what's your operating budget? Well, we had a meeting yesterday with CPAs and accountants and lawyers and Lord, that's not my gift, when you start getting into the weeds, about it. But basically, it's what it takes to operate your church. You take your budget and you get away with debt service, you do away with missions, you do away with money that comes in and out like preschools and schools and all that. And what's left is your operating budget. And you look at that, and the church is requesting, asking for 1% of that. And so, you say, you fill out a form and you send it in to the conference, the Global Methodist Church conference, and you say, this is what our 1% looks like. Take that and we send that on to the global church. It collects all that. It says, looks like next year we're going to get whatever, $3 million. Now we'll set our budget at $3 million. It's like for a church that was saying, I'm going to do my pledge campaign first. And when I get my pledge campaign done, and I see what we're going to have, now we'll set the church budget. So they're going to do that. So that's how apportionment's going to work. The other thing everybody always asks about is, what about preachers? How are we going to get our preacher? Well, it's going to be an appointed system. We're a connectional denomination, and it's an appointed system, a hybrid appointed system. What do I mean by that? Well, say First Church, whatever, they need a new pastor. They'll say, we need a new pastor. Well, the Global Methodist Church will say, well, the conference will say, here are 4 people who we think would be a good fit for you. They've been vetted, they are qualified educationally, they have various amounts of education, because we're making it a lot easier to become ordained in the Global Methodist Church than it is in the United Methodist Church. I personally have felt that local pastors have gotten the short end of the stick in the United Methodist Church for years. And so we're going to make it a lot easier for those local pastors who fulfill the educational requirements and pass all the vetting and all the examinations to become ordained as elders in the Global Methodist Church. So here are 4 candidates for you. You interview them. Your SPR committee interviews them. You say, well, we really like Lisa. We want her to be our pastor. And so the church will say, fine, we'll appoint Lisa as your pastor. And that's how that works. The Global Methodist Church will never come to you and say, well, we need your pastor to go someplace else. Now, your pastor may say, I want to go someplace else. You can't help that. But the conference will never say, we're stealing your pastor to go someplace like they did Andy. Yeah. Okay, and so that's how the appointment system works for that. So I could talk all night, but let me stop. Any questions about anything? Yes, sir.
Kevin, you say we get a preacher. That means we get people for more than 3 or 4 years?
Absolutely. You keep your pastor. 2 things about that. One, you keep your pastor as long as your pastor wants to stay and you want your pastor. No, you can keep your pastor for 25, 30 years. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. The other thing is you can change anytime you want. Like right now, generally, in the United Methodist world, you change usually in January or most likely June. We're not going to have that fruit basket turnover thing. We'll be appointing pastors and moving pastors all year long. The other thing is, well, are you going to have enough pastors? Well, yes, because we're not constrained, we're not confined to an annual conference in the Global Methodist Church. For instance, I have a church down in the south end of the Global Methodist Church in the south end of the conference. And so I've got them talking to 2 people from the South Georgia conference and 1 person from the North Georgia conference. They're talking to, so we go, you can do a nationwide, you do a worldwide search for your pastor when you're ready. But the North Georgia conference of the Global Methodist Church has to appoint that person. Make sure that that's that person. Yes, sir.
You said there were several requirements or qualifications for pastors. One of them being the educational. What is the educational requirement?
Well, okay. So the education requirement is not complex. You have to have a high school degree, and then you have to have certain classes, and you can do those classes through what's called course of study. You go to something called license to preach school, and then course of study. And once you go through the course of study, you have to have classes in Methodist polity, preaching, Old Testament, New Testament history. There's a series of classes. So if you have those classes, you can be qualified. Sometimes, depending on what you do, you can be a deacon first, ordained as a deacon, and then become an elder. When I came in, that's what happened to me. Right now, deacon is a whole separate order in the United Methodist Church. They do different things. I was ordained first as a deacon for 2 years, and then as an elder. That's the way the Global Methodist Church is going to do that. But here's the thing. For instance, that church that I'm talking about in South, first pastor, we sat down. They said, no, we want a seminary trained pastor. That pastor had not been to seminary. And they said, we want somebody who's been to seminary. So, okay. So we'll send the people that have been to seminary. So the local church has a lot more say in who comes.
Open communion or closed?
Oh, open communion. Yeah, that's the Methodist tradition. Absolutely open communion.
You going to enter the draft?
What's that?
He said you're going to enter the draft. Come back.
Oh, you come back. Transfer portal. Kate did say to me, she said, I know how much you love Griffin. You come home tonight. I said, I'll come home tonight.
Kevin, what's our next step?
Excuse me?
What is our next step?
Next step. Okay, so you have to have a vote. And your next step, I guess, would be to ask the district superintendent to call a church conference. So you have to do that. So that's done through whatever governing body you have as administrative board or administrative council. That body has to write a letter to the district superintendent in January, February, and say, we'd like a church conference. That's the next step.
So the church council, Kevin, has to request that, right? Is that what you're saying?
The only people that can request a church conference is the superintendent, the administrative council, I think the pastor or the administrative board chairman can, with the permission of the district superintendent, Or there's a paragraph, it's kind of interesting. There's a paragraph called, it's number 248, if you want to write that down, 248, in the 2016 Book of Discipline. And it says all that, and it says, or, it says by 10% of the total membership of your church signing a petition. Now, I will say this, that there have been a couple of churches that have done that. 10% of the church had signed a petition because for whatever reason, they felt like the people on the administrative board did not represent the body of the church for whatever reason. And so they signed their, they got their 10% or more, they had like 20% of the congregation to sign a petition, turn it into the district superintendent and say, we're requesting a church conference for the purpose of disaffiliation. Now, that particular district superintendent did not accept that. And so they called me and said, what do we do? My response to them was, well, I think you need to ask the district superintendent why. I think that's the fair next step. Say, what did we do wrong, or what is it about that paragraph that doesn't apply to this? So the way I read it, and I've talked to several former district superintendents, the way they read it, it should. It should. So that would be an alternative if a administrative council doesn't want to do it. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yes, what is your opinion regarding waiting until 2024? Do you not think that there will be ways of disaffiliating at that point?
Okay, so here's the thing. So remember I said the protocol for grace and separation was going to be voted on. It'll be voted on in 2024. Maybe. I mean, it's on the agenda, or it should be on the agenda for 2024. But here's my concern. Remember, I also said that the folks with a progressive slant on things have rejected it. They promised they would support it, but they changed their mind, and they have pulled their support of it. The Council of Bishop has changed its mind and pulled its support of it. So I'm not real confident that when people are saying we're pulling our support of it, that they're going to approve it. Plus, we can't count on just the traditional leading delegates to get anything voted on at General Conference, because we're going to be, for the first time in 2024, we'll be very much outnumbered. I give you an example of the delegates for this coming, for General Conference, when we voted on in the North Georgia Conference, there was not one traditional clergy that was elected as a delegate. 100% they were progressive clergy that were. And I'm not saying that speculation, they were on a list. They said, this is the progressive clergy we want to, and they had like 54% of the clergy who were called themselves progressive, and they dominated. They got all so we don't have any traditional clergy in our delegation, and I would say maybe 2/3 of the laity are traditional, but of course with all the clergy, because for every laity there's a clergy. So I mean we're outnumbered greatly.
What about bishops? Are there any traditional bishops now?
Not one. Not one. We elected 4 new bishops in the southeastern jurisdiction. They're all very left-leaning.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Say we went and had a vote, it was defeated by a narrow margin.
Yes.
We decided, if we work a little bit harder, we can get this passed. We have to wait a certain amount of time to ask for another vote.
No, but you have to go through the same procedure. You have to pretty much start over. The administrative council will have to ask for another vote. Yeah. And that, by the way, the district 10 has a lot of leeway in that, because the district 10 sets the date when the vote's going to be. So, yeah, Rayson.
Yeah. We're all sinners. And I'm wondering why the LGBTQ issue has triggered this movement, and is there any guarantee that the global Methodist Church is going to follow the discipline? And are we at all 100% compliant with the discipline as we stand right now? And so why are we isolating this particular trigger when we're maybe not complying in other areas?
Yeah, that's a really deep and good question. And let me answer that in a couple of ways. One, no, I mean, none of us adhere to 100% to the discipline. I would say discipline is, in some ways, is aspirational, you know. It's like, so we try to, you know, but no. I think, why has that issue come to the forefront? Well, a couple of reasons. One is there's not many things that people consider sin that people are trying to say are not sin. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's nobody out there advocating, marching for rights for adultery or rights for stealing. You know what I'm saying? So if you believe that the act of homosexuality is in fact incompatible with Christian teaching, and you see your leadership, your church leadership, as well as all society, you know, promoting that and celebrating that, then that's one of the reasons why it has come to the forefront. The Lobello Methodist Church, I should have printed this out, but the Lobello Methodist Church says it in a slightly different way. It says that there have been a lot of people harmed by sexual misconduct and by including adultery, fornication, and it lists, you know, a whole bunch of, and it said we want to open our hearts and lives to all those people to come in and find healing and acceptance. Yes?
What is the view on abortion?
The Lobello Methodist Church I'll just pro-life. I mean, that's all I can say. Is pro-life. I think, and by the way, so is the United Methodist Church. Like I love, you know, our book of discipline. Our book of discipline says right now that abortion is never to be used for gender selection or birth control, but it recognizes that there's time in human life when there's no good choice, and when those times come up in life, it needs to be handled prayerfully in consultation with medical personnel and spiritual advisors. I love that, you know, the way that's worded that way. Yeah. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well put together presentation. A couple of things that disturb me. First of all, is there something else besides the Global Methodist Church that groups can go to that want to leave the Methodist Church? And the second thing is this, address this if you would. Is this not a power play? Game of Thrones? Maybe I've been watching too much TV. But between the United Methodist Church and the Global Methodist Church for power, for money, and we hope the souls will come.
Yeah.
Would you address that?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Good questions. I need to say this. So after if you disaffiliate, if anybody disaffiliate, the next decision will be where do you land? And you've got several options. And there's one I'll speak against, okay? You can stay an independent church. Most of those 70 churches that disaffiliated stay independent churches. I'm 100% against that, okay? Because there's no accountability there. There's no connectionalism. It's not the Methodist thing to do at all. I don't agree you should stay an independent church. I mean, bad things happen that way. There are other landing places. There are other Methodist, or I'll use the word Wesleyan, denominations out there that would fit quite nicely with it. There's the Free Methodist Church, there's the Congregational Methodist Church, the Wesleyan Methodist Church, the Nazarene are Wesleyan. In fact, I've always said Nazarene are Wesleyans who mean it. I mean, they're serious about following what the Nazarenes are. There's the Society of Independent Methodist Churches. There are 5 or 6 other good groups that you can join. I like the Global Methodist Church because it was designed by United Methodists for United Methodists. You know, so in my opinion, it's taken the good things about United Methodism and leaving off some of the things that are troublesome, including, by the way, I don't consider it a power grab, quickly, because if it was a power grab, we would try to stay. You know, the traditionalists would try to stay and get everybody else to leave. Our thing is, you know what? We'll leave. Y'all keep the big buildings. Y'all keep the boards and agencies. Y'all keep the $100 million in your bank account. Y'all keep all of that. Just let us go. You know, let us go with our church, with our stuff. Let us go and let us worship and let us live out our faith as best we feel like we need to do, as we can do. So that's why I say, if it was a power grab, we'd be wanting those buildings, because they're worth billions of dollars, and we'd be wanting all those bank accounts. The North Georgia College offered like $90 million, something like that, in its war chest, or more than that. So yeah, no, I really don't think. I think it's a true theological or sociological difference. Yes, Matt.
Money question. The North Georgia United Methodist Foundation office investments there. How will that break down? If we leave the United Methodist Church, I don't know. I've never been to any of the administrative meetings with this church.
You said if you owe the foundation money?
No. You have money in the bank.
Oh, well, if you have money invested in it, they'll be excited about it. They won't want that money, but you can still do that. They take money from anybody, you know, outside. I don't mean that facetiously. I'm being serious. They like you don't have to be a United Methodist Church in order to use them for investments. I don't think is that right? I think I'm right on that. I do know, like, I was worried about, because the Federal Credit Union has pretty much all my money. So I went to them, like, if I join the global church, you're not going to keep my money, are you? You're not going to give my money back to me. And they're like, oh yeah, well, we're open to anybody. So I don't think that's a problem.
They'll follow more governmental law as compared to it. I'm just afraid there's money there. I'm president of Midway Methodist Church Association, and we get a return off of the investment there.
I think if to be safe, I'd have a conversation with them. Just call and say, hey, look, there's a possibility we might do that. Are there any ramifications of that?
The United Methodists say, no, that's not yours anymore. It belongs to us.
It already does that.
It already does.
It already does belong.
So I think you'd be a better. I would talk to them. I see what you're saying, but I would talk to them about it, and I would talk to them like tomorrow. Because if you need to move some things around before you vote, then you need to do that. Because once you disaffiliate, it's kind of like filing a lawsuit, you know, or divorce. Once you try to move money around, it looks suspicious. So I would ask those questions now of them. Anything else? Anybody else? Once, twice.
Hey Kevin, I do want to just have a clarification if we can. So I'm going to ask this question, I want you to answer it, so instead of me answering it. So if we would like to, if the church council does allow us to have a vote on disaffiliation, that process is not made by our minister at all. Is that correct? That is a lay-driven type process, right? The whole disaffiliation process, is that correct?
It's driven by your administrative council.
But lay people, not our minister, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. All right, anything else? Hey!
If you voted to disaffiliate, does the bishop have anything to do, or can the bishop prevent you from disaffiliating?
Well, I would have said no 2 weeks ago, but in Arkansas, the bishop kind of the end run, and when you get to the when they get to the annual conference, up to that point, all of us at annual conference had just been perfunctory. They had just been formula, and just been, they basically said these churches are in good stead. They're in good favor. But what he did, or I think it's a he, might be a she, took out the 3 largest churches. Didn't want to lose their largest churches because the disaffiliation is happening with some of the largest churches in United Methodism, as well as some of the smallest churches. He pulled them out and then let some conversation take place about questions. It sounded like there was questions about the process, and they voted no. And so now they've hired lawyers and all. So, but I would say, up to that, with that one rare exception, no, the bishop can set the rules. It's not even the bishop, really, it's the board of trustees of the conference that sets the rules. But the bishop has great influence with the board of trustees.
What was the deadline on doing all this? The deadline.
Like I said, you took to get your letter into the district superintendent saying we want a church conference. It's February 28th. February 28th. And then you'll have the district superintendent will call a church conference in March or April, and then in June you'll be voting on an annual conference, and then you'll be disaffiliated.
February
28th.
February the 28th.
28th.
That's next year.
Don't confuse me.
Terry, how do you find a minister? How do you find a minister once you've gone into disaffiliation?
Well, we talked about that. The Lobello Church will send you candidates. If you're independent, you're on your own. You do it like Baptists do. You put an ad in the paper, or word of mouth, But I will say this. A church like Griffin, when Sam Jones disaffiliated, we had a lot of people that wanted to come be our pastor. At Griffin first, there won't be any problem finding somebody who wants to be your pastor. A lot of people want to be your pastor. St. Charlie by the gas station, 10 miles outside of Tallapoosa, they're going to have a little bit more difficult time. They'll need the help of the local Methodist church. They'll need the help of a denomination to find somebody. Yeah. All right. Well, one more.
Here's from my understanding, the whole disaffiliation rule is on the ground that you're disaffiliating on the fact that you are not kosher with a sexuality issue, right?
Okay.
That's the way it's been explained.
Yeah. Okay, let me clarify that, because that's worthy of clarification. So, what 2553 says is this. I disagree with the United Methodist stance on human sexuality, or I disagree with the action or inaction of the annual conference. Okay. So, it's pretty broad door. It's saying I don't agree with what the discipline says, or I don't agree with the way the conference has responded to what the discipline says in light of what's happening in the world around you. Now, you rightly can ask, well, why is it based on human sexuality? And that's a good question, and the answer to that has to do with parliamentary procedure. In 2019, when they had that remember the called meeting at the annual conference I was talking about, the general conference? Well, William taught me that when you have a called meeting, you have to identify the issue, don't you, William? He taught me you have to identify the issue. So you can't just have a called meeting. It has to be on an issue. So the called meeting in 2019 was dealing with the fighting over human sexuality. So every amendment, every motion had to deal with human sexuality, which is why it's voiced towards human sexuality. But actually you're saying, I disagree with what's written in the Book of Discipline, or I disagree with the way the conference has handled it, either what they've done or what they have not done. And so my testimony is, I don't like what the conference has not done. because they have not spoken out against some of it. All this stuff is going on, and they haven't spoken out against it. And that hurts my heart. I expect more. All right. Last one.
Is there a process that you can buy your property?
Yes, you can. There are other ways to leave. Thank you. You're not talking about this. There are other ways to leave the United Methodist Church. You can go 2549, I think is the, and that, by the way, is what Mount Bethel. You heard about Mount Bethel? That's what they did. They were not allowed to go like this affiliation process 2553 because they were not in good standing in the United Methodist Church. Because the United Methodist bishop had appointed a pastor, Steve Ushery, to Mount Bethel, and they refused him. They said, we don't want to take him. We like Jody, our current pastor. And so since Jody refused to leave, and they said, well, you're not in good standing. So they literally negotiated, they had literally closed the church and buy it back. So, and then they negotiated the price for buying it back. And as you know, they probably said it was $39 million property. They bought that for $13 million. So they had to pay $13 million. You don't want to do that. That's an expensive way. That's an expensive way. God bless y'all. Thank y'all very much.
We appreciate it. I'm going to ask Kevin if he'll give us a copy of his presentation. I think he will. We'll make that available. Again, we're recording it today, so as soon as we get that back, I'll let you know where you can go and where you can tell the folks who couldn't make it during this wet weather today. Hope everyone has a safe trip home. Thank you for coming. And Charlie, anything you want to say? Okay. Thank y'all.